At the will reading, my billionaire grandfather left everyone millions of dollars. I only got $50. My dad smiled. My brother laughed. I said nothing, staring at the money he left me. He had quietly marked something on it. At the bank, the manager looked at me and froze. But before that vindication, I had to endure the suffocation of their victory. The room smelled of leather and unearned confidence. My father, Richard, leaned back, already spending his $5 million. He didn't look at me. In our family, eye contact was reserved for people who mattered. Daniel Ross, the attorney, adjusted his glasses with professional indifference. He had just announced my brother Ethan's $2 million, citing his potential. Ethan smirked, shooting a glance at me that screamed, "I told you so." I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, hands folded, trying to be the furniture I was raised to be. Ross cleared his throat, the sound sharp against the sudden quiet. "And to Taylor Carter," he read, his voice devoid of pity, "the sum of $50. The air left the room, replaced instantly by a heavy, suffocating heat. It wasn't 50,000. Just two crisp bills. Ross slid them across the polished wood. They stopped at the edge, precarious like me. That was when my father smiled. A terrifying, satisfied curling of his lips. "Appropriate," he murmured, loud enough to be heard. Dad knew the value of everything. I didn't cry. Tears were a currency my father didn't accept. I simply picked up the money, the paper feeling strangely heavy, and walked out. Their laughter followed me into the hall, a sound that felt like a door slamming shut forever. The parking garage was a concrete tomb beneath the city. I sat in my sedan, engine off, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. This silence wasn't the commanded quiet of my childhood. It was desolate. I looked at the passenger seat where I had tossed the bills. $50. A final joke. A punchline to a life spent trying to be good. I reached for them, intending to tear them into confetti, to destroy the evidence of his rejection. My hands shook, rage finally piercing through the numbness of the shock. My thumb brushed the corner of the top bill, and I stopped. The texture was wrong. Rougher. I held it up to the dim garage light, squinting. My grandfather had been a man of details, a man who believed the truth lived in the fine print. "Look closer, Taylor," he used to say. "Most people only see what they expect." I tilted the green paper. There, near the serial number, was a tiny mark. Ink, not print. A set of specific numbers drawn with a microscopic hand, invisible to a casual glance. It wasn't graffiti. It was a verification code. I recognized the sequence from the old ledgers he let me organize as a child. The ones my brother thought were boring. My heart hammered against my ribs. A violent rhythm. This wasn't a disinheritance, it was a test, a map. I checked the second bill. It had the matching sequence. I put the car in gear, the tears drying on my face. I wasn't going home to cry. I was driving to the one place my father deemed too old-fashioned to matter. The city blurred past my window, a smear of gray and steel. I checked the rearview mirror again, half expecting my father's black Mercedes to be tailing me. He wasn't. To him, I was irrelevant, a problem solved with a $50 bill. But the silence in my car felt loud, charged with a frantic energy I hadn't felt in years. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wasn't just driving. I was fleeing a crime scene where I was the only victim. At a red light, I grabbed the bills again. My hands shook so hard the paper rattled. I traced the microscopic ink with a fingernail. 7, 4, 2. The numbers were drawn with a draftsman's precision, nestled inside the scrollwork of the border. They weren't random coordinates. They were a page number from his private ledger, the black book he kept locked in the library desk. The light turned green. I hit the gas, the realization hitting me cold. My grandfather didn't trust banks, despite owning shares in most of them. He trusted systems he controlled. I remembered a rainy Tuesday when I was 12. sitting on the rug while he drank scotch. "Taylor," he had said, "if you want to hide a forest, you plant it in a city park." He taught me then about ghost accounts, assets that existed only if you knew the right question to ask. The family thought he was senile. I knew he was simply waiting. The $50 wasn't the inheritance. It was the key. He knew Richard would smirk. He knew Ethan would laugh. And he knew I would say nothing, take the money, and look closer, because I was the only one who ever listened to him. If I had thrown the money back, the trail would have ended. It was a test of character disguised as an insult. A sudden, fierce pride swelled in my chest, finally pushing back the shame. I pulled into the older financial district, where the streets were narrower and the shadows longer. The destination was the Carter Trust building, a relic from the 20s with heavy stone lions guarding the entrance. My father hated this place. He called it a mausoleum and moved all the family accounts to a glass tower uptown. But grandfather had kept one account here. Just one. I stared up at the granite facade. It looked impenetrable, a fortress built for secrets. Parking the car, doubt suddenly seized me. What if I was wrong? What if the marks were just doodles from a dying old man? Walking in there and demanding a meeting, based on scribbles on a $50 bill, sounded insane. I could already hear the teller's polite confusion, see the security guard stepping forward to escort me out. I checked my reflection in the visor mirror. My eyes looked wide, frantic. I took a deep breath, forcing my pulse to settle. I smoothed my skirt and grabbed my purse. The 2 bills sat inside my wallet like burning coals. I didn't lock the car. I didn't care. I walked toward the heavy brass doors, the sound of my heels echoing against the pavement. I was done being the invisible daughter. I was done being the furniture. I pushed the door open, the cool air of the lobby hitting my face. There was no turning back now. The gamble had officially begun. The lobby was a cathedral of silence. Marble floors echoed the hushed whispers of tellers behind brass grates. It smelled of floor wax and old copper, a sharp contrast to the antiseptic glass of my father's preferred bank. I approached the nearest window, clutching my purse like a shield. The teller, a young woman with severe glasses, didn't look up immediately. I waited, forcing my breathing to slow. "I need to speak with the branch manager," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She blinked, looking me over with practiced skepticism. "Do you have an appointment?" Her tone suggested I was lost or soliciting donations. I straightened my spine, channeling the arrogance my father wore like a second skin. "My name is Taylor Carter. It concerns the estate of William Carter." The name landed heavy. Her eyes widened slightly, the boredom cracking. "One moment," she murmured, reaching for a phone. She whispered something urgent, shielding the receiver. The air around me seemed to tighten. 5 minutes later, I was ushered into a corner office that felt more like a library. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, absorbing the light. Mr. Thompson stood behind a massive desk, his gray suit impeccable, his expression unreadable. He didn't offer a hand. "Miss Carter?" he said, his voice dry. "I was told this is urgent. I assume you're here about the primary accounts." He thought I was begging. He thought I was here to fight for scraps. "No," I said, stepping forward. "I'm here about the $50. I opened my wallet and pulled out the 2 bills. They looked pathetic against the grandeur of the room. Wrinkled and green. I placed them on the leather blotter, smoothing them flat with a trembling hand. Thompson sighed, a sound of profound irritation, and reached for them as if to hand them back. "Miss Carter, I don't have time for games." Then his eyes caught the serial numbers. He froze. His hand hovered over the money, fingers curled mid-grasp. The irritation vanished, replaced by a stillness that was absolute. He leaned in, pulling a jeweler's loop from his pocket with sudden, jerky movements. He bent low, examining the ink marks I had traced in the car. I watched the blood drain from his face. He looked up at me, and for the first time, he actually saw me. "Where did you get these?" he whispered. "You know where," I replied. "They were in the will." Thompson didn't answer. He stood up abruptly, walked to the heavy oak door, and turned the deadbolt with a loud click. My stomach dropped. "Sit down, Miss Carter," he commanded, moving back to his desk. He punched a code into his computer, his hands moving with frantic speed. A red light on his phone blinked once, then turned steady green. The room suddenly felt very small and very dangerous. "I need your identification," he said, not looking up from the screen. "Driver's license." "Now." I handed it over. He scanned it, comparing the face on the card to the woman sitting before him. "It matches," he muttered to himself. He finally sat back, exhaling a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. "Your grandfather was here the morning he died," Thompson said quietly. "He told me that if anyone else came in, I was to call security." Thompson stood up, gesturing toward a panel behind his desk. It wasn't a closet. It was a private elevator. We stepped inside, the machinery humming with a smooth, expensive vibration. "This level is restricted," he said, his voice bouncing off steel walls. "Your grandfather built the vault below the foundation." I watched the numbers descend past the basement level. The air grew colder, smelling of dust and ozone. My hands were still shaking, clutching my purse. I was descending into the belly of the beast. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a concrete corridor. At the end stood a circular steel door, massive and dull in the fluorescent light. Thompson approached the keypad, blocking my view as he typed a sequence. Then he turned a key hanging from his neck. The tumblers clicked, a heavy, mechanical thud vibrating through the floor. "He stipulated you enter alone first," Thompson said, stepping back. The steel door groaned, swinging inward on silent hinges. The darkness inside seemed waiting for me. I stepped over the threshold. Motion sensors triggered a bank of overhead lights, illuminating the room in a stark whitewash. I gasped. It wasn't just cash. Floor to ceiling shelves were lined with thick binders and metal lockboxes. In the center, on a simple metal table, sat stacks of bearer bonds and rows of gold bars that gleamed with a heavy, oily luster. This wasn't retirement money. This was empire money. It felt alive, radiating a cold power that made my skin prickle. I walked toward the table, my footsteps echoing in the confined space. My father had preened over $5 million. My brother had gloated over $2 million. I did a quick mental calculation of the gold alone. Based on current market rates, it was staggering. The bonds were likely worth 10 times that. My grandfather hadn't just left me a slice of the pie. He had left me the bakery. My knees felt weak. The scale of the deception was absolute. Thompson appeared in the doorway, his silhouette stark against the corridor light. $32 million, he said softly. "In bearer bonds, bullion, and untraceable securities." I turned to face him, unable to speak. "This vault exists outside the probate court's jurisdiction, Taylor. It is not part of the public will." He walked over and touched a stack of documents. "Your father and brother have no claim here. Legally, this room doesn't exist. It belongs solely to the person holding the key." He pointed to a single cream-colored envelope resting atop the central stack of bonds. My name was written on it in my grandfather's shaky, distinctive script. I reached out, my fingers brushing the heavy paper. It wasn't sealed with wax or tape, just folded with care. "He wrote that the day he brought the cash down," Thompson said. "He told me it was the only instruction manual you would need." I picked it up. It felt heavier than the gold. I didn't open it yet. I just held it to my chest, closing my eyes. The silence of the vault was louder than my brother's laughter had been. I was rich, powerful, and completely invisible. But then Thompson cleared his throat, shifting his weight uncomfortably. There is one other thing, he said, his voice dropping an octave. Your father's lawyer called the main branch 10 minutes ago. They know a substantial withdrawal was flagged. They don't know who, but they know it's happening. We returned to the office, leaving the cold vault behind. Thompson poured water from a crystal carafe. His hand steady, while I sat in the leather chair. The envelope rested on my knees like a heavy stone. The noise of the city outside felt miles away. I slid my finger under the flap, breaking the seal with a sharp tear. The paper was thick, expensive stock. My grandfather's handwriting was jagged, written with the urgency of a man running out of time. My dear Taylor, it began. If you are reading this, you passed the test. I knew you would. The words blurred for a second. I have spent the last 5 years watching. I saw who visited to check their watch, and who visited to check my pulse. Your father sees me as a bank. Your brother sees me as a stepping stone. Only you saw me as a person. I wiped a tear before it could fall. He hadn't been senile. He had been a spy in his own home. The $50 was not a punishment, he wrote. It was a filter. If you had complained, thrown a tantrum, or tossed the money away, Thompson was instructed to donate this vault to the Red Cross. My breath hitched. I had almost left it in the car. Wealth without character is gasoline. I needed to know you had the discipline to look past the insult. You are the only one who listened when I taught you how to see. The letter continued, the ink growing fainter near the bottom. This money is not for buying yachts. It is for buying your freedom. Your father uses money to control. I am giving you the power to walk away. He had underlined freedom twice. It wasn't just cash. It was an exit strategy from a lifetime of emotional servitude. Do not let them make you small again. You are the head of this family now, whether they know it or not. I folded the letter, slipping it into my pocket where it felt like armor. Thompson cleared his throat, pushing a stack of legal documents across the mahogany desk. He set up a shadow trust. Thompson explained, uncapping a heavy fountain pen. It effectively locks the assets. You are the sole trustee. No one else can access a dime without your physical signature. He pointed to the dotted line. Once you sign this, the transfer is irrevocable. You become the bank. I looked at the paper. Signing this meant war. It meant my father would no longer be the son I orbited around. It meant displacing the hierarchy I had lived under for 25 years. I picked up the pen. The weight of it felt good, balanced. I didn't hesitate. I signed my name in fluid, dark strokes Taylor Carter. With that ink, I severed the cord. I wasn't the daughter begging for approval anymore. I was the one holding the leverage. Thompson took the papers back, locking them in a drawer. It is done, he said, his face grim. But listen to me closely. He leaned over the desk, his eyes hard. The transaction alert your father received. It will lead them here eventually. They smell blood in the water. He handed me a business card with a private number. They will come for you, Taylor. And when they realize you have the capital, they won't ask nicely. They will demand. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended animation. I didn't go to work. I didn't answer my phone, which buzzed incessantly with calls from Dad and Ethan. I sat in my small living room, staring at the peeling paint on the windowsill, the letter from my grandfather burning a hole in my pocket. I knew they were coming. The bank leak Thompson warned me about had undoubtedly trickled down to my father's sharks. When the knock finally came, it wasn't a polite tap. It was a rhythmic, authoritative pounding that rattled the frame. They were here to collect. I opened the door to find the full tribunal standing in the hallway. Richard looked impeccable in navy wool, but his jaw was tight. Ethan leaned against the wall, scrolling on his phone, looking bored but dangerous. My mother stood behind them, clutching her purse, her eyes darting nervously. We need to talk, Taylor. my father said, pushing past me without waiting for an invitation. They filled my tiny apartment instantly, their expensive cologne clashing with the scent of my stale coffee. It felt like a violation. They treated my home like a waiting room. Richard didn't sit. He paced the worn rug, inspecting my cheap IKEA bookshelf with disdain. "We've been worried," he lied, his voice smooth as glass. "You ran out of the reading. You haven't returned calls." I leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms to hide the trembling in my hands. "I've been busy," I said. Ethan snorted, finally looking up. "Busy doing what?" "Spending $50. The mockery was reflexive, a habit they couldn't break even when they needed something. They still thought I was the punchline. They had no idea the joke was over. "Enough games." Richard snapped, turning to face me. The pleasant mask slipped, revealing the predator beneath. A contact at the main branch flagged a massive asset transfer linked to your social security number. $32 million, Taylor. My mother gasped, covering her mouth, though I suspected she already knew. The number hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. "It's a mistake, obviously," Richard continued, stepping closer, invading my personal space. "Grandfather was confused. He made a clerical error. We need to fix this before the IRS gets involved." He reached out, expecting me to fold. I didn't flinch this time. I looked him in the eye, channeling the cold steel of the bank vault. "It wasn't an error," I said clearly. "It was a trust. And I am the sole trustee." The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan dropped his phone on the couch. Richard's face went from condescending to purple. "You stole it," he hissed. "You manipulated a dying man." I laughed, a short, sharp sound that surprised us both. "I was the only one who didn't manipulate him," I countered. "That's why he gave it to me?" Richard took a deep breath, forcing himself to recalibrate. He switched tactics seamlessly from intimidation to negotiation. "Taylor, be reasonable," he said, softening his voice to a paternal purr. "That money is family capital. It's meant for the estate, for investments, for your brother's future." He gestured to Ethan, who looked like a child denied a toy. "We can pool it. We'll manage it for you. You don't know how to handle that kind of wealth." He reached for my shoulder, a gesture that used to make me desperate for approval. Now it just felt like a leash. I stepped back, letting his hand fall to his side. "No," I said. The word was small, but it hit the room like a grenade. "I am not pooling anything. And I am not letting you manage a cent." My mother stepped forward, tears welling in her eyes. "Honey, please. Don't tear this family apart over money." It was the same line she always used to silence me. "I am not tearing anything apart," I told her, my voice steady. "I am just finally refusing to pay for my seat at the table." The realization hit them. I wasn't asking. The paternal act vanished completely. Richard slammed his hand onto my kitchen counter, making the coffee mugs jump. "You ungrateful little brat," he spat. "We will sue you. We will contest the will. We will drag you through court until you have nothing left but legal fees." Ethan stood up, energized by the aggression. "We'll prove he was incompetent," Ethan added, sneering. "We'll prove you coerced him. You'll lose everything." The air in the room grew toxic, violent. They were showing me exactly who they were, just as grandfather predicted. I walked over to the drawer, where I kept my own major files. I didn't pull out a gun. I pulled out a photocopy of the trust agreement Thompson had given me. "Go ahead," I said, tossing it onto the table between us. "Sue me, but read paragraph 4 first." Richard snatched the paper, his eyes scanning the legal jargon frantically. "The assets are frozen upon any legal challenge," I explained calmly. "And if you contest the mental state of the grantor, you invalidate the primary will too." Richard froze, the paper crinkling in his grip. If he claimed grandfather was insane to give me the vault, He was admitting grandfather was insane when he gave Richard the 5 million. He would torch his own inheritance to burn mine. It's a suicide pact. Dad, I said softly. Do you want to burn it all down? He looked at me with pure hatred, realizing he was checkmated. Ethan looked between us, confusion clouding his face. What does that mean? He asked. It means, Richard whispered. She anticipated this. The conference room at Ross and Associates smelled of lemon polish and stale anxiety. 1 week had passed since the ambush at my apartment, and the silence had curdled into a cold war. Richard sat at the head of the table. His legal team flanked like centurions ready for battle. I sat opposite, alone, with only a single manila folder in front of me. The air conditioning hummed, a low drone that barely masked the tension in the room. They looked confident again. They thought they had found a loophole. Daniel Ross cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes as he shuffled his papers. He placed a document on the center of the table, with a heavy thud. We have reviewed the trust documents. He began, his voice tight. The terms are specific. Richard leaned forward, a predator scenting blood in the water. Is it binding? He demanded, his eyes darting to me. It's a poison pill? I said, cutting in. Grandfather anticipated you would try to bleed me dry in court. He knew you better than you knew yourself. My father's face went slack, then tight with disbelief as he processed my words. He looked at Ross, silently demanding a rebuttal that wasn't coming. Ross just nodded, looking miserable. The clause is ironclad, Richard. Any beneficiary challenging the mental capacity or estate distribution of William Carter shall be disinherited entirely from all estate assets. The room went dead silent. Richard slammed his fist onto the table, making the water pitcher rattle. He wouldn't do that, he whispered. You poisoned him against us. You made him do this. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling as she dabbed at dry eyes. Taylor, you can't let this happen. We have debts. The properties, Your father leveraged everything on the expectation of the estate. She reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine but not touching. We are family. You can waive the clause. You can share. It was the same old song. She wanted me to fix the mess Richard made. She wanted me to pay the ransom for a love that didn't exist. Ethan stood up, knocking his chair back against the wall with a crash. This is bullshit, he shouted, pacing the small room. She's bluffing. She won't pull the trigger. He glared at me, his eyes wild and desperate. You are too weak, Taylor. You always have been. You think you can stand up to Dad. You'll cave. You always do. He was banking on the old version of me, the one who apologized for taking up space. I looked at him and felt nothing but pity. I am not bluffing, I said, my voice calm and low. And I am not negotiating. I opened my folder and pulled out 3 distinct envelopes. These are disengagement letters. Effective immediately, I am severing all financial and personal ties. I slid them across the polished wood toward them. If you contact me, my lawyers will file harassment charges. If you sue, you lose your millions. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. The power shift was palpable. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was evicting them from my life. Richard stood up slowly, his face a mask of cold, unadulterated fury. If you walk out that door, he hissed, pointing a shaking finger, you are dead to us. Do you understand? No holidays. No calls. You will be alone. He thought it was a threat. He didn't realize it was a promise I had been waiting for. I've been alone in this family for 20 years. I replied. At least now I can afford the rent. I turned my back on him. I walked toward the glass doors, my heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. I could hear them breathing, the sound of oxygen being sucked out of the room. Just as I reached the handle, Ethan scrambled after me. Wait, he said, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Taylor, seriously. I have a marker due in Vegas. Just a loan. 50 grand. You won't even miss it. He grabbed my arm. It wasn't affection. It was panic. He was drowning and I was the raft. I looked down at his hand on my sleeve, then up at his sweating face. I reached into my purse, bypassing the checkbook. I can't give you 50,000, I said softly. But I can give you what I got. I pulled out a regular $50 bill from my wallet, symbolic of the value they had assigned me. I pressed it into his palm. Here, I said. Start investing. He stared at the bill, confused and insulted. It was the perfect symmetry. I pushed through the glass doors without looking back. Behind me, I heard Richard shouting at the lawyers, a muffled roar of impotent rage. I stepped into the elevator and hit the lobby button. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the view of my former life, I finally exhaled. My chest felt lighter than it had since I was a child. I was an orphan by choice, and a millionaire by right. The price of my freedom was exactly $50. 5 years later, the silence in my life is no longer empty, it is peaceful. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my foundation's office, watching the city rain wash the streets below. There is no gold nameplate on my door. Just a simple sign reading the Carter Initiative. We fund legal aid for women trapped in financial abuse. Giving them the exit strategy I almost didn't have. I don't own a yacht. I don't appear in society pages. My father's bankruptcy made headlines 3 years ago. My success remains a whisper. I never answered the calls when Richard lost the estate to bad leverage and hubris. I didn't celebrate his fall, but I didn't rescue him either. The money in the Shadow Trust grew quietly, protected by the very laws he had once tried to weaponize against me. Sometimes, I see Ethan's face in the tabloids, looking older and desperate, chasing schemes that always fail. They are ghosts now, haunting a life that no longer has room for them. I built walls not to keep people out, but to protect the peace within. A sudden crash came from the outer office, followed by a loud, triumphant giggle. My 4-year-old daughter, Maya, ran in. Wearing a cardboard crown and wielding a plastic sword. She didn't knock. She didn't apologize for the noise. She simply claimed the room because she knew she belonged there.
Look at me,
she shouted, spinning until she was dizzy. I smiled, feeling the old, familiar ache in my chest dissolve completely. I am raising her to be loud. I am teaching her that her voice is not a liability. Grandfather William would have loved her. He would have admired her absolute refusal to shrink for anyone's comfort. I sat down on the rug with her, adjusting her crooked crown. He was right about everything, especially the isolation. It is the cost of integrity. People tell you family is everything, but they forget that poison can run through blood just as easily as water. I didn't lose a family that day in the lawyer's office. I just stopped renting their affection. The transaction finally closed, and the balance sheet was clear. Money doesn't change people, it unmasks them. That was the line in his letter I read every anniversary of his death. It stripped Richard of his arrogance and Ethan of his charm, leaving only their greed exposed. For me, it stripped away the fear. It gave me the luxury of saying no without consequence. I don't check price tags anymore. But more importantly, I don't check the room to see if I am allowed to exist. The vault gave me resources, but the rejection gave me my spine. Maya ran off to conquer the reception desk, leaving me alone with the sound of the rain. I opened my wallet, bypassing the black credit cards to find a small, laminated sleeve tucked in the back. Inside was a single $50 bill. It wasn't the marked one. That was framed in the vault, but a fresh one I kept as a reminder. It was the price of my brother's loyalty and the cost of my father's love. I touched the green paper, feeling only gratitude. It was the cheapest tuition I ever paid.